Hey everyone, and welcome to Paperback Journeys, where today we're going to be talking about the 5 books that I read in the month of November. Which book was my favourite, which was my least favourite, and then we'll update the top 10 list of 2025 to see if any of this month's reading has made the list. And if you'd like to keep up to date with my top 10 list throughout the year, well, we're coming up to the end now, but maybe also throughout next year as well, then please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell for updates. I'm also going to be giving out a prize to the person who came closest to guessing what I would rate each of the books that I read in November. I'll do that at the end of the video. I'll say this, I think I had a really good reading month this month, and I think the top 10 list, there's going to be some changes. Even at this late in the year, there's still books which can crop up and surprise me, and I do think that we're going to see the top 10 list get impacted by this month's reading. So let's get into it. Let's talk about the first book that I read in the month of November, and that book was The Institute by Stephen King. So the setup of this book is that we've got this young boy called Luke Ellis. He's 12 years old, and he is already smarter than everyone he knows, including his teachers, including his parents. And even before he becomes a teenager, MIT wants to recruit him and have him take all of his studies early to complete high school so that he can graduate early, and then he can move on to MIT at 13 years old. So, you know, he's a legit genius. And then one night, in his quiet little suburban home, gets invaded by a group of elite mercenaries, and they kill his parents and they drug him. And when he wakes up, he finds himself in a place called the Institute, and there Luke meets all of these other kids that are around his age, mostly teenagers. Some of them are a little bit younger, some of them are like little kids, and for the most part, you know, they're completely left to their own devices. They can eat whenever they can eat whatever they want. They can go to bed whenever they want. They can play all day if they want. They can even do things like drink alcohol. They can do whatever they want to do. But every so often, one of them is taken away into one of these strange rooms where they're subjected to experiments that test their telepathic and telekinetic abilities, because each one of these children are very special. And Luke, like, he's had this small gift all of his life. He can move things very slightly with his mind. If he ever gets a little bit emotional, a bit excited, then sometimes things just move a little bit. And he tried to ignore it. He tried to pretend it wasn't real, but others have noticed. And now the Institute wants to use that power for their own ends. At first, we don't really know what the Institute is really, and what it's trying to achieve. And that mystery, I think, is part of the fun. Because the story is told from Luke's perspective, we're discovering everything right alongside him. So that's kind of like the enjoyment of the book, really, is finding out what is going on. Just a quick heads up as well about the pacing. The first, I would say, 10% of the book focuses on a character who seems completely unrelated to the story. And I'm not sure why Stephen King chose to structure the book that way. Honestly, there are a few choices that King makes where I can't see the reasoning behind it. But I think it's maybe that unpredictability that's part of what makes his writing so engaging. It's never really like formulaic. And so, you know, there's a reason that I keep coming back to Stephen King books after all. I mean, this has got to be, I would say this is probably the 42nd, 44th, somewhere around there Stephen King book that I've read. But yeah, that first stretch was really confusing, and it was confusing enough that I genuinely had to like double check to make sure that I was definitely reading the right book. But if you go in expecting that the first 10% is going to be maybe not feel quite in sync with the rest of the book, and you're going to have to wait before the story begins. If you go in with that expectation, I think it'll be all right. Another thing about this book is that usually with Stephen King, it's the villains that are the most memorable part, right? They're just completely unhinged, they're deranged, and then on the other side, like the protagonists can feel a little bit flat, they're just sort of a vehicle to tell the story, and the story really centers around this crazy creature or this psychopath. This is actually, I would say, the opposite of that. Like the protagonist, Luke, is quite interesting, I would say. He's not like a top 10 Stephen King character or anything like that, but he probably is the most interesting thing about the book. And in this case, it's the villains that feel a little bit vanilla, Yeah, just nothing really memorable about them. So yeah, I would say this book, the beginning is a little bit confusing. The ending was okay. It was fine. The middle was good. Yeah, it was fine. It was fine. I would not put it in my top 20 Stephen King books, I don't think. Okay, so the next book that I read in November was Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. So I read this along with the PBJ Book Club, which is this channel's book club, and we split it over the course of 3 weeks where we just meet every Friday to chat about the chapters that we read that week. This story weaves together 3 main plot lines. You've got Tova, Sullivan, Cameron, and Marcellus. And Marcellus is a giant octopus. Tova is this 70-year-old widow who's working a night shift in a small town aquarium just outside of Seattle. And after losing her husband and dealing with this kind of like decades-old disappearance of her teenage son, she has fallen back and has found some comfort in the mundane. She's retreated completely into a routine and she's pulled back from the world. She keeps her life tidy. She keeps everything quiet. She's kind of like, she just made her life very small and become quite insular. And then you've got Cameron, and Cameron is this younger guy. He's down on his luck. His life is a bit of a mess. He's intelligent, but he's a bit of a slacker. He just drifts from job to job. He's getting fired. He's messing up. He's drinking. He's smoking. He's doing drugs. When you read about this character, he's 30 years old, right? But when you read the chapters for Cameron, he feels as though he's like a teenager, or maybe like very early 20s. And I'll talk about him a little bit later because he was memorable for some reasons I didn't really like. And then you've got Marcellus, and Marcellus, as I said, is this giant Pacific octopus. He's living in Tova's aquarium, and his chapters are way shorter than I expected that they would be. He is still one of the main characters, I would say. He is an impactful character, but yeah, his chapters are 2 pages long. So it's like little intermissions in the story. And yeah, Marcellus is just floating around in his tank. He's watching the humans. He's quite judgmental. He's always trying to find some way that he can escape from his tank so that he can get access to some of the food that he likes. Because the kind of food that he gets, I think he's mostly getting mackerel, and he's just so sick of the mackerel, So he just wants some snapper or something. I don't know what he wants. I can't remember what kind of fish he wants, but there's a kind of fish that he really wants. And so, yeah, he's always trying to get out of his tank. So, yeah, he's got this sort of like problem-solving brain, and he starts to put the pieces of the puzzle together about Tova's son and the mystery of what happened to him. As the story goes on, these 3 lives all start to overlap, and then you get these friendships that start forming, and some of the mysteries begin to untangle. And the book really looks at things like loss, found family, second chances, tiny little glimmers of hope that show up when you least expect them. I think one of the things that I liked most about the book was the setting. I don't think I've really read very many books that were set in an aquarium, so that was nice. That was something a bit different. Reading this book does feel a lot like reading a Frederick Backman novel. In fact, the narrator, if you were to listen to the audiobook, the narrator, I can't remember her name. It's something Marin. I'm going to have to look it up. Her name's Marin Island. I just looked it up. So, the narrator of the Beartown trilogy is the same narrator as Remarkably Bright Creatures. So obviously someone has kind of twigged on and said, listen, this is exactly like a Frederick Backman book. So let's get the same narrator that he uses as well. You know, you've got these flawed characters. They're a bit broken in different ways. Somehow they begin to sort of heal one another and fill the gaps in each other's lives that were missing. I think that's what I enjoyed about it. The heart of the story. There's some sort of cute humor as well. And I think I especially liked the bond between Tova and Marcellus. That was probably the best thing about the book. I mean, he's so snarky about humans. He thinks humans are idiots, basically. But Tova is the one person that he genuinely likes and he wants to help her. And so, yeah, their relationship was really sweet. I read a lot of like very dark and heavy fiction, and so this was a really nice change of pace. It's a gentle, character-driven story with people who you kind of feel like people you might know in real life. You know, they're not these larger-than-life epic characters. They're just people going about their lives. I've got to say, I think I was expecting a bit more of a mystery, because that felt, when I read the back of the book, that felt how the book was being marketed to me, is the octopus was going to be like cracking a case. I was imagining maybe he witnesses a murder or something and he tries to communicate with the humans to explain. No, it's none of that. There is a little bit of a puzzle. There's a little bit of a mystery, but there's not these massive plot twists or you know, big races against time. There's a little bit of that, but not as much as I was expecting. One criticism that I have of the book is that Cameron, he just took a long time for me to warm up to him. He at the beginning, you think to yourself, well, you know, he's had a little bit of a tough life, so you sort of feel bad for him to begin with, but he just leans so heavily into that victim mindset. And usually I like a lovable loser, you know, someone who's he's an underdog, he's been dealt a bad hand. But the problem with this is that everyone around him seemed to just keep helping him and giving him money and jobs and free food and places to stay. And so in a way, you're kind of thinking, is he an underdog? Because it just seems like he's got this massive support system. Everyone is just giving him handouts constantly. And he never says thank you, well, not never, but very rarely does he say thank you. I don't know, maybe Shelby Van Pelt was trying to create a realistic character, you know, just this sort of burnt out young bloke. But I was getting a little bit frustrated with him. It was a bit better towards the end, but for a lot of this book, I was just thinking, I don't really like this guy. I would say another problem with the book is that it depends heavily on coincidences, like a lot of coincidences. I can suspend my disbelief quite a lot, but yeah, there was like 4 or 5 coincidences where I was just thinking, wow, everything's lining up. Huh? But yeah, I think if you went into this one just knowing that it's not a thriller, it's not high stakes drama, it is a very gentle, cozy story about some quite nice, mildly interesting people that are trying to make their lives a little bit better, you know. Also, this is going to be made into a movie as well. I think the movie comes out next year, so that should be nice. I would definitely watch the film. So obviously at this point, I'm thinking to myself, the month started off a little bit bland, but from this point on, things got much better. And it all started with this little beaut. I know you're probably sick of seeing me holding this book in these videos. There's a reason that this book is featured in so many videos, and it's because it's 3 books in one, right? So that's the reason. So yeah, in November, I read the middle chapter of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. At this point in the story, the Fellowship has split, the characters are scattered across Middle-earth, and each group is dealing with its own challenges and battles and dangers and turning points. Some of them are trying to rescue their friends, others are crossing into new territories, and the story jumps between these paths, just building up this massive sense of movement across this vast landscape. So I finished this book roughly about a week ago. I haven't been able to stop smiling about it since. Like every so often I'll just be having some lunch and then just kind of going, do, 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 do. You know, yeah, it's just really nice. It's just a really nice book. And actually, I did have the film soundtrack playing in the background as I read through this. I was just having a great time, just drinking pints of tea, spending time in Middle-earth. I know it's the second book in the trilogy, so obviously I'm not going to talk too much about anything that happens. I'm never going to assume that anyone's read the book or watched the films or anything. But yeah, because the characters are all spread out, you end up bouncing between these different parts of Middle-earth. It made the book feel like a map that I got to explore with each passing chapter. I mean, I've always been obsessed with the movies, but I just think the books give you more time to sit and take everything in. They slow down and spend a lot of time in certain areas where they're resting and having conversations. And I just feel like, although I loved the movies, this book or this collection of books has given me more appreciation for the world that Tolkien has created. It's amazing to me, you know, like how much love he put into this world, to spend so much time crafting it, and all of the different areas, or the maps, the histories of the different kingdoms. There's just so much to dive into. I think that's maybe one of the reasons that it's got so much staying power and why it's still relevant today. People are still discovering it today, is because there's just so much to get lost in. The most surprising thing about the Two Towers is how long it takes for Frodo and Sam to show up again. They don't really appear in this book until about 60 or 70% into the book. And yeah, I wasn't ready for that. I was expecting to pick up immediately. So, and it's not a short book either. It's a pretty beefy book. So I was just, I was hanging out with all of the others from the Fellowship, but Sam and Frodo, I just kept thinking, where are these guys? I seem to remember that the movies spread things out a bit more evenly between the different plot lines. This is also the book where one of my favorite characters in the entire series shows up. And I think that he is not just one of my favorite characters in this series. I think he's one of my favorite characters in all of fiction. And as soon as he showed up, I was properly excited. I was like, here we go. Here we go. This is it. This is what I've been waiting for. I can't go too deep into it because, again, I'm avoiding spoilers for the series. But what I have been doing is filming my entire journey through reading all of this, kind of how I did with The Dark Tower by Stephen King. So I am going to be releasing those videos as well. I think I'm just going to release it as just one giant video where I go through everything. The Hobbit, the Fellowship of the Ring, the Two Towers, the Return of the King as well, after I've read that. And yeah, I'm just going to release it as one long video. I imagine it will be over an hour, at least be an hour long. There's a chance that I will be actually reading The Return of the King in December. You might I'm not sure what order I'm going to release these videos in, but as you can see, look, that's one of the options that's on the wheel here. So we're going to have to see if that pops up. When you're watching this, you might already know that. I don't know. You exist in the future for me, you know. But yeah, if the Return of the King comes up, then I will probably release the video in January. You know, where I just review and kind of give spoilers for the entire series. So the next book that I read was The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. This book was constantly getting recommended to me in the comment sections of my videos, and it's one that I've wanted to read for ages. I finally got to read it in November. So this book is set in a world that is regularly being hit by these devastating natural disasters. They're not like these small tremors either. They're violent, near-apocalyptic upheavals that reshape the landscape. They release toxic gases and wipe out wildlife and ruin agriculture. And these events, when they happen, are called seasons. And they happen with enough regularity that society has basically adapted and rebuilt itself to survive them. So, like, for example, rather than building like tall towers and or even houses, a lot of people will actually dig holes, kind of like hobbits, really, dig holes in the ground and just live underground, because, you know, if there's like a big cataclysm that happens, there's no chance of their house falling over if their house is literally underground. And also, there are these people that are referred to as origins, and they are able to control the seismic activities. And so all over the place, these origins are kind of like, anytime it seems like there's going to be an earthquake or something like that, they can kind of quell the seismic activity, keep it away from the towns where people are living. And this story follows three women who are all at different points in their lives. They're all dealing with the fallout of these disasters. Some of them have lost people that they love, and all three of them are origins, right? So they all have this special mental power. And that makes them simultaneously very useful to people, but at the same time, sort of maybe too powerful. So powerful that people are a little bit afraid of them, or in some cases, deathly afraid of them and want to kill them. And this book starts at the very beginning when one of these huge natural disasters hits a city and it forces all of these refugees out. And as the disaster kind of spreads, everyone starts to flee across the continent. And that's the introduction to the story. That's like the launching point. And from here, we get this richly detailed and harsh world that's filled with all of these interesting landscapes and memorable characters. The thing that impressed me most about this book was the world building. It reminded me of everything that I love about The Lord of the Rings. Like, there's a strong sense of place. It feels fully lived in with its own history. The fifth season isn't going deep into the history, though, or the lore in the same way that Lord of the Rings does. And honestly, it wouldn't really make sense for a story like that to have a lot of history, because every time history starts to take shape, a season comes and it just wipes out civilization. And so there would be no way to record history. They attempt to, but it's kind of scattered. And so all of their history is a little bit of a mystery. I'm sorry that rhymed. But even with all of this chaos, the world feels incredibly authentic. The rules that are in place are rigid. There is a system that makes sense. The way that people adapt feels believable. And there's just this dark, bleak tone that is running through everything. And I just think that it suits the story perfectly. It's a very atmospheric book. The opening is very slow. So if you need a fast-paced story and you like a lot of action straight from the get-go, then this might not necessarily be your thing. I personally loved the pacing. It gave me time to settle into the world, absorb the information. Also, the author makes you work for the information as well. There's no like hand holding or info dumps. There's from the very beginning going to be terms that show up and you have no idea what these things mean. And sometimes they show up multiple times in a chapter and you're just thinking, I don't know what this is. I have no reference for this. Later on, you find out what that means and it kind of recontextualizes the earlier chapters. And then slowly you start to understand things. It's as though you're a foreigner that's arrived in a country where you just know nothing about it. And then slowly you start to go, oh, okay, this is how things work here. This is why people are angry. This is why people are afraid. Thematically, I think this book is very dense. It's about oppression and power and who gets to decide whose life matters and how much their life matters. I don't think it's very subtle, but I don't think it's trying to be subtle. As I mentioned earlier, the three main characters are these origins, and so they can manipulate seismic energy. They're very valuable, but also there are forces which have been able to control them and sort of tame them. There were a couple of things that happen in this book which took me by surprise. There's one thing actually that I predicted very early that would happen, but it didn't ruin anything, you know? If I had to have a criticism of this book, and this is nitpicking, I think, really, but my main criticism is that because there is magic in this book, I think this book would have really benefited from a hard magic system. And by that, I mean that you understand the mechanics of how they're doing what they're doing. It can be a little bit fuzzy. And so during some big action scenes, I was at certain points kind of struggling to picture exactly what was happening. I got the general idea, but I'm a very visual reader. And so that every so often pulled me out of the story, and the book just became words on a page rather than something that I could really picture what was happening. One other small thing, and this is a really tiny thing, is you know how some fantasy books or some sci-fi books, they create their own curse words? You know, well, this book does that quite a lot. And so characters are very often saying, oh, earth fire under heaven, or they'll say, oh, rust, what the rust is going on under earth, the rust, earth under rust, rusted earth. Like they're just always saying. There's even one point where one of the characters is in like a really stressful situation and they go, crusty rust. And I was like, crusty rust? Imagine saying crusty rust when you're in a high stakes situation. But like I say, it's a very small thing. It's just every time it came up, every time someone cursed, I was just kind of like, But overall, I'm going to say that I really loved this book. It felt like this first book, it's the first book in a trilogy, right? And this book just felt like a true introduction to the characters. And now that I know them, I am excited to dive into the rest of the trilogy. My interest is completely locked in. I genuinely have no idea where this book is going to take me next. And I'll say this, it's some of the best world building that I've read all year. Really good stuff. The next book that I read in November is, this is a beefy boy. It's King's Sorrow by Joe Hill. So this book only came out about a month ago, and it starts off with this guy called Arthur Oakes. He's this quiet student. He's working in the rare book section at a college called Rackham College. I'm not going to spoil it too much, but basically he gets blackmailed by a group of local, low-grade thugs, and they need him to steal about $60,000 worth of these rare books. And remember, he's working with first edition Mark Twains and all that kind of stuff. And if he refuses to do it, then they're going to hurt someone that he loves. So he's kind of stuck in this impossible situation. And then one of his college friends, once he finds out about it, suggests something pretty crazy. Arthur has this little group of 5 friends, and they decide to use this sort of sinister occult book that's bound in human skin, and they use it to summon up this ancient dragon to take out the people that are blackmailing him. And at first, it seems like this silly little thing that a group of friends would do at college. Maybe you've had a couple of drinks, you're playing with a Ouija board, that sort of thing. And Arthur's a bit cynical about it. He kind of thinks, this is a bit of nonsense, but I need a distraction. And then when they complete the ritual, it actually works. They summon up this dragon from another realm. And now they're completely freaked out because they wasn't expecting it to be real. But unfortunately, of course, there is a catch. And as part of the bargain, the dragon lets them know that every year on the anniversary that they summoned him, every year they have to provide him with a new victim to take out. And if they don't do it, if they say, I'm not going to do it, then he'll take them out, right? So they have no choice. It's that classic Faustian bargain. They've messed with powers that they don't fully understand. And effectively, it's like they've made a deal with the devil. And so from that point, the novel spans across decades, and we follow how this pact with this dragon corrupts and reshapes their lives and their friendships and the kind of people that they become later in life. Some of them seem to want to embrace the curse. And, they're thinking, imagine if you had that power, if you had to choose people that, someone has to die, so it might as well be bad people. And so you kind of think, who would it be? Who could it be? But others spend years trying to break the curse, and they get dragged deeper into the dark mystery. I think this would definitely qualify as a horror, but more than that, I think this book is a fantasy. I mean, there's a dragon. There's a dragon. So yeah, it's definitely a fantasy book. A lot of people compare it to It, and I think, yeah, that's legitimate. A group of friends starting off as young characters, and then we follow them later in life, and the story moves through the years and showing how the characters have changed. So there is a lot of that. And at the center of everything is this relationship between these characters and how these relationships get twisted up by the pressure of the choices that they're forced to make. And there's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of regret and loyalties that are being stretched to the limits. It's a very long book. It's almost 900 pages. And so it really does take its time setting up the characters, setting up the stakes. But even though it's very long, I don't think there was a section of the book that dragged. The pacing is pretty solid. I liked it a lot. I think it might be one of my favorite Joe Hill books of all time. I need a little bit of time to think about that though, because I also really liked Nosferatu as well. So it's between this and Nosferatu, which is my favorite Joe Hill book. I've read other Joe Hill books. I read Black Phone and Heart-Shaped Box. I thought that was really good as well. 21st Century Ghosts or 20th Century Ghosts? I think it's 20th Century Ghosts. It's like a collection of short stories. That was great. So I am a Joe Hill fan, definitely. But I think King Sorrow is one of his best. There's also just an incredible scene that happens on a plane. I really like that. Maybe my favorite scene in the book. Also, if you're a Stephen King fan, Joe Hill always seems to, in his books, like to drop in these little Easter eggs from his dad's work. So Joe Hill is Stephen King's son, right? So he'll drop in little Easter eggs. I think that's fun. That's like a nice inside joke for the readers. I think there's about maybe two or three occasions in this book where we just hear a little bit about characters from the Stephen King universe, people that they're discussing. I'm not going to say who, don't worry, but people that they're discussing, people that they've seen on the news. We find out what happened to them after the book ended, after Stephen King's book ended, find out about them. Also, there's just a couple of other little references peppered in. And so, yeah, I like that. That makes me feel like whenever I see those kind of little Easter eggs that are dropped in, it just makes me feel like I'm home, like I'm in the club. Also, something that really surprised me is that I think someone said that it's been 10 years since Joe Hill released a novel before this one. That's crazy, man. Don't do that again. Don't wait so long next time, Joe. You don't have to be like your dad, where he's cranking out 4 or 5 books a year, but maybe somewhere in the middle. Maybe just give us a book a year. Yeah? Better. Yeah? And so, yeah, out of that lot, what was my worst book of the month? Whenever I have a really great reading month like this, where it's packed with lots of fun books, it feels a little bit harsh to say what the worst book was, because I don't think that I read any bad books. There was no bad books that I read. But if I have to pick one, and I do, I'm going to have to say that the worst book that I read this month, unfortunately, was Remarkably Bright Creatures. I liked it. I would say it is over average. I thought it was fine. I thought it was pretty good, actually. But I've got to pick a worse one. And if I have to pick the best thing that I read this month, now this is where things get a little bit more complicated, because I read some bangers. I mean, for me, it's between two. And I might change my mind after I make this video. I don't know, but I'm just for now, I'm going to say that the best book that I read this month, was The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien. I thought it was a lot better, actually, than The Fellowship of the Ring. I like The Fellowship of the Ring, especially the beginning, but this just seemed to have more epic scenes. It felt less like they were traveling the whole time and more like they were actually arriving at locations that were impactful. So yeah, I just think I preferred The Two Towers. And here's the big question. Did it make it onto my top 10 list for 2025? Just before I update the top 10 list, I want to take a moment just to thank all of the Patreon members for supporting this channel. I want to say thank you to the cult members. A big thank you to the named men. And an extra special thank you to the quartet. Thanks to all of you for supporting the channel. Like I always say, you just give me so much motivation to keep putting out these videos, and knowing that people are out there supporting the channel, it makes a big difference. So thanks again. And in these monthly wrap-ups, I like to pay a member of the quartet a random compliment. And so this month, I would like to tell Denise Peachy. Denise, come over here. Come over here. I've got something to tell you. Listen, Denise, if I was to describe you in a single word, that word would be kind. The thing I admire most about you is that you never treat kindness as a performance. You're not chasing praise or attention. You do it because that's who you are. You do it because you believe in treating people well. So simple, yet so rare. People talk about if they had one wish, what would they do? If I had one wish, it would be that there are more Denise Peachies in the world. And if there were, everything would run smoother, conversations would be gentler, and people would just feel better about themselves. Are you a hero? Yes. If you like this channel and you'd like to support it and get some perks like the Metallic Paperback Journeys bookmark, access to some of the exclusive rooms on the Discord server, and also access to the PBJ Book Club, then you can click on the link in the description below. All right, so let's bring down the leaderboard and take a look at the current top 10. So as it currently stands, as you can see, in the number 10 spot, we've got The Green Mile by Stephen King. Oh, that's a precarious position to be in. Then you've got Rejection by Tony Tulatamute, The Reformatory by Tananarive Due, Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien, The Emperor's Soul by Brandon Sanderson, East of Eden by John Steinbeck, The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. Oh my God, I've had such a good reading year. The Age of Madness trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, and in the number 1 spot, Boy's Life by Robert McCammon. Ooh, you beauty. And so, did any of this month's reading make the list? The answer is Yes, it did. Yes. And in fact, you're not going to believe this. 3 books made the list this month. Yeah, it was a really good month. Woo! Crazy that 3 books in November can make fair enough. 3 books in February, that's nothing, right? I've only read at that point, maybe 13 books or something. But 3 books in November. But unfortunately, every silver lining has a cloud. And so that does mean that we are going to lose Rejection and The Green Mile. Oh, it's painful. Let's load up the book canon. And so now let's take a look at the new top 10 list for 2025 and see how that's changed things. As you can see, now in the number 10 spot, we've got The Reformatory. And coming in at number 9, we've got King's Sorrow by Joe Hill. In the number 7 spot, we've got The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. And actually, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, yeah, that's how we're going to be measuring it now, has been bumped up a couple of spaces. So now it's in the top 5. So doing really good. The Two Towers definitely helped out the trilogy. We'll see if I get to read the 3rd and final book in December. And now we get to have some fun. We get to hand out a prize to the person who played the rating game and came closest to guessing what I would rate the books that I read this month. And the winner is, from Germany, it's Berge. Yes, Berge, you've won it for the 2nd time. You're the 3rd person to win it for the 2nd time. I don't know what it is. Some of you are just really good at guessing. I don't know if you've watched a lot of my videos and now you're sort of like, my tastes are starting to become easily predictable. Whatever it is, people are getting really good at it. So yeah, later today, you are going to receive an Amazon gift card in your email. I hope you buy a book with it, Berge. If you think that you can guess what I'm going to be rating the books that I read next month, then you can find all of the details over on the Paperback Journeys Discord. So as far as channel updates are concerned, I'm actually going to be in London next week. I'm going home to visit my family for Christmas, and I'm not going to be there all of December. We're just going to be there early December, So I've tried to arrange it where I'm going to be dropping a couple of videos in scheduled for when I'm away. So hopefully that's all going to be okay, because we got to keep the algorithm happy. Otherwise I'll just fall off of your algorithm and you'll never see me again, and that will be a tragedy. But anyway, that was the month of November, and now we move into December, and we're about to say goodbye to 2025. I can't believe it, how quick this year has gone. But as always, I'm going to be spinning the wheel to find out what I'm going to be reading for the coming month of December. If you'd like to see me spin this thing and find out what I'm going to be reading, then you can click up there. I think I've got some really good options. I'm calling it Hail Mary month, because I think that all of the options that are available have the potential to be the best book that I read this year. We shall see. Anyway, thanks so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. And as always, happy reading.